What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 3rd, 2026, about 7 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 18th book in our Book to React series. This is episode 3. Are we on episode 3? Episode 4. Episode 4 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panthers. This was a memoir that he wrote in 1972, if I remember right. And we just finished part 1, which is the first 6 chapters of this autobiography, where he talks about his life growing up in Oakland, California. Before that, his memories of being a baby in Louisiana, being in the public school system in California and how it denigrated his black self, and his awakening to his own radicalness or understanding of the world and being encouraged to be educated by his friends in the streets and also his family members. Very motivational and very powerful so far. We're going to be starting part 2 today of this book by reading the first 3 chapters of part 2. Before I do that, I will be jumping into the comments section every now and then and replying to people that want to have any questions or have any comments. So Andre Beja says, I will tell you if your mic doesn't work. Okay, my mic does work. My mic always works. If you say that my mic is not working, I'm probably going to ignore you because you're probably trolling. But shout out to Andre Beja, always up in the chat as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. Part 2 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. It goes like this. I began to question what I had always taken for granted. Let's go here, chapter 7. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. My homemade education gave me, with every additional book I read, a little bit more sensitivity to the deafness, dumbness, and blindness that was affecting the black race in America. That is from the autobiography of Malcolm X, one of the most powerful books I ever read, and a book that I encourage all of you to read one day, if you have not. Let's continue here. Chapter 7 is titled Reading, from Huey P. Newton. By the time I had reached my last year of high school, I was a functional illiterate. Melvin was in college and doing very well. Melvin is his brother, by his way. I felt that I could do it too, but when I talked to a counselor about it, he made the mistake of telling me I was not college material. I set out to prove them wrong. First, I had to learn to read. The school authorities told me not only that I was not college material because of my performance in school, but also that I was not intelligent enough to do college work. According to the Stanford Binet test, I had an IQ of 74. Huey P. Newton says he had an IQ of 74, and by the time he graduated high school, he could not read. Think about that. How you start is not how you finish. They felt justified in discouraging me. I knew I could do anything I wanted to do. That was how I maintained my self-respect. I wanted to go to college, so my defiance of their opinion, as well as my admiration for Melvin, were incentives for me to learn to read. Go into the comment section. Kristen Daniels, 1272, says hello. Shout out to Kristen Daniels as well, and everybody else up in the live stream. If you got anything you want to say, I will be reading your comments or giving you a shout out. So hop in for the conversation as we read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. I knew I would have to read well in order to make it in college. I also knew that it would be difficult to find someone to teach me because I was embarrassed. I decided to teach myself. My key was the poetry I had learned to recite. I knew plenty of words, but could not yet recognize them in print. Using Melvin's poetry books, I began to study the poems I knew, associating the sounds in my head with the words on the page. Then I picked up Melvin's copy of Plato's Republic, bought a dictionary, and started learning to read things I did not already know. The Republic seemed like a logical choice. I wanted to join Melvin and his friends in their intellectual conversations. It was a long and painful process, but I was determined. Lee Edward had taught me to look them in the eye and keep advancing. They said I was not college material, so I was advancing on them. Powerful. Powerful, powerful. Shout out to Ant-Man123 up in the comments. Shout out to Ant-Man for joining the conversation. Hopefully you're enjoying reading Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton as well. All right? So, I spent long hours every day at home going through the Republic and pronouncing the words I knew. If I did not know a word, I would look it up in the dictionary, learn how to sound it out if I could, and then learn the meaning. Proper names and Greek words were difficult, and I soon began to ignore them. Day after day, for 8 or 9 hours at a time, I worked on that book, going over it page by page, word by word. I had no help from anyone because I did not want it. Embarrassment overwhelmed me. My mother loved reading and devoured books. Here I was, an adult who could not read, as my father, my mother, and Melvin could. I felt so low, I stayed in my room where nobody could see what I was doing, poring over the words, using the dictionary on every single line, and memorizing the sounds and the meanings. I mean, learning how to read from, Plato's Republic had to be difficult because I bet that is a very complex book. I've never read Plato's Republic, but I'm sure it's a very dense and hard book. Why didn't he do the Frederick Douglass route and go with the Bible? You know what I mean? Didn't Frederick Douglass teach himself how to read using the Bible, if I remember right? If you know, put it in the comments. Anyway, shout out to Avery Adams up in the chat, talking about a Steve Harvey suit from Pusha T. Well, one thing Pusha T does not have is a Grammy for Best Rap Album, which he will never have. That overrated punk-ass rapper. Fuck Pusha T and fuck the Clips. I said it. I'm a stand on business. Avery says, boy, please tell me the story behind the blazer. I think it's nice. So I bought it. I make it look fly. I make it look cool. That's the point. And as long as y'all are out here listening to the revolutionary Huey P. Newton's own words, I will wear whatever it takes to get y'all engaged and your minds intellectually stimulated. King Daddy 2241. I do not like saying that name. But shout out to King Daddy. And that's the last time I'm giving you a shout out because your name is atrocious, sir. That is a name no man should be saying. No, not like that. Anyway, Andre Bay has given, okay. Andre Bay says, girls will be all over you with that outfit. That's hilarious. I only need one woman all over me, and that's my wife. Anyway, going to continue here with Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. So once or twice, I asked Melvin to pronounce a word for me or explain it. He was shocked that I could not recognize some of them, and at first, I think, disgusted. That hurt. His disgust could not compare with my own. He said that not knowing how to read was a very bad thing, but I knew that by then, and his disapproval made it even more difficult to learn. My sense of shame had kept me from seeking help earlier. Now it became impossible for me to ask. I had to do it by myself. It seems to me that nothing is more painful than a sense of shame that overwhelms you and afflicts the soul. This pain may not even be your fault, but it can still be very but it still can be very acute, the pain of being ashamed of yourself, in this case, being ashamed of being illiterate. It hurts more when you know that there is no natural process, as in the body, whereby the pain will go away. You have to relieve it with your own strength of will, your own discipline and determination. I had been hurt many times in fights, but nothing equaled the pain I felt at not being able to read. The pain from fighting went away in time. The shame I felt would not go away. I do not know how long it took me to go through Plato the first time, probably several months. When I finally finished, I started over again. I was not trying to deal with the ideas or concepts, just learning to recognize the words. I went through the book about 8 or 9 times before I felt I had mastered the material. Later on, I studied the Republic in college. By then, I was prepared for it. Should we read the Republic? Let me know. Should we do a book react to Plato's Republic? I floated reading Mein Kampf before. Y'all said no. So let me know, should we read Plato's Republic? Anyway, when I began to read, a whole new world opened up for me, said Huey P. Newton. I became interested in books. I still could not read very well, but each new book made it easier. I did not mind spending many hours because reading was enjoyment rather than work. When I reached this point, I accumulated books and read one after another. I did this all through my senior year in high school and the summer following. By the time I really knew my way through a book, I had graduated from high school. All right. So that's the end of chapter 7 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. And I'll never forget what my father said to me. My father said, once you learn how to read, you become dangerous. You know what I'm saying? That's the first real quote I remember from my father. And that's probably the most important one I remember from my dad. And it seems like every hero that I've had, whether it be Malcolm X or Huey P. or, Asada or Angela Davis, they all have a reading story in their autobiography, like how books opened up a whole new world for them, made them realize the self, made them come into knowledge of self. It's just so powerful. And that's what I tried to do with the Book to React series, and hopefully it's engaging you as well. All right, we're going to go to chapter 8 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. All my life, I have been looking for something, and everywhere I turned, someone tried to tell me what it was. I accepted their answers too, though they were often in contradiction and even self-contradictory. I was naive. I was looking for myself and asking everyone except myself questions, which I, and only I, could answer. It took me a long time and much painful boomeranging of my expectations to achieve a realization everyone else appears to have been born with, that I am nobody but myself. Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man. Another great book I remember reading in high school, absolutely powerful book. Y'all should check Ralph Ellison's book out, The Invisible Man. It's an important book, probably a very moving book if you've never had a chance to engage with that type of deep, existential Black philosophical literature. It's a fiction book, but it reads like, it's just a sweeping fiction book, I could say. It's like, I think it's better than Native Son. If you never read, Ralph Ellison didn't write Native Son. Who was it? Oh my God, who was it that wrote Native Son? I want to say Langston Hughes, but it wasn't. It was Langston Hughes. Yeah, Langston Hughes wrote Native Son. Anyway, I think it's better than Native Son, but that's a discussion for another day. Let's go on to chapter 8 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, titled Moving On. About 2 years before I completed high school, my inner life was plunged into a sea of confusion and turmoil that lasted until Bobby Seale and I organized the Black Panther Party. About 4 years, I went through the kind of pain that comes when you are letting go of old friends and certainties and having nothing to take their place. This distress had begun earlier, and was a result of contrasting and varying elements in my life. As I matured physically, the problem seemed more insoluble. The strain became greater. I felt adrift. I began to question everything about my life. There seemed no haven of security in anything I was doing or hoping to do. I questioned my religious activities and my search for God. I questioned whether school was worth the effort. Most of all, I questioned what was happening in my own family and in the community around me. My father's struggle with bills was common in many of the families of my comrades. He had worked hard all his life, only to sink more deeply in debt. It seemed that no matter how hard he worked and sacrificed for his family, it led to more work. Things never became easier. I began to ask why this had happened to us and to everybody around us. Why could my father never get out of debt? If hard work brought success, why did we not see more success in the community? The people were certainly working hard. It seemed we were predestined to endless toil. We poor people never reached the point of having time to pursue the things we wanted. We had neither leisure time nor material goods. Not only did I want to know why this was so, I wanted to avoid a similar fate. While I was looking for answers to the questions of family and religion, I was also thinking of joining a monastery. Okay, could you imagine Huey P. Newton as a fucking monk, bruh? Like, what is that, a monastery? I was thinking of joining a monastery, not so much out of religious conviction as for the isolation and time to examine these questions in peace. I felt the need to have a place where I could examine things without interference. Isolation would shield me from the troubles that were suffocating my family and my father. But I did not entertain the idea very seriously and soon gave it up. I began to think that Melvin's approach through books was one way to examine these questions. His life required a certain amount of detachment from the community, and that was attractive to me. On the other hand, there was my brother, Sunnyman. For a long time, I had believed that he had the freedom I was seeking. He had possessions galore, no bills, and was defying the authorities and getting away with it. Even so, I came to the conclusion that he had not so much defied the authorities as comprised with them. As compromised with them. He didn't defy the authorities, he compromised with them. All the hipsters with cars, clothes, and money had rejected the family relationship that I valued so highly. They had achieved a level of freedom at great personal cost. To me, this was not freedom, but another form of subjugation to the oppressor. Even if Sunnyman had escaped their control, his life did not answer my questions. It did not help me understand why most blacks never gained the freedom he seemed to have. I finally decided that Sunnyman and his comrades did not have the power to determine their destiny. They operated through someone else's power, the oppressors, and they were not free as long as they had to reject some part of themselves. Very interesting. I really, if you haven't seen the other episodes of Revolutionary Suicide that we're reading, Sunnyman is Huey P. Newton's brother, who's also a drug dealer, right? Huey is the youngest of like 7 kids. So he's got a bunch of older brothers, and his older brother is out there dealing smack or whatever, driving fancy cars, and he's got girls and shit like that. And it's so funny. He's like watching from a project window, his brother outside making his moves and living his best life, you know what I'm saying? And he's coming to this analysis like, my brother might look like the man, but he's only the man that the white power structure allows him to be. They allow him to be a drug dealer. They allow him to peddle poison to the people. You get what I'm saying? So very interesting analysis right there. By the way, shout out to everybody up in the comments section who is going hard and, helping the engagement and everything. So shout out to HUD1Q3T. For joining the conversation. And shout out to Mar Gomez as well for joining the conversation and helping us bolster Revolutionary Suicide, Huey P. Newton's great memoir that needs to be discussed more and analyzed more in Black studies. Let's continue here. The religious beliefs acquired in childhood also troubled me. After struggling through some of Socrates' work, as well as those of Aristotle, Hume, and Descartes, I began to question what I had always taken for granted. The ideas and the philosophical works that Melvin was studying spilled over into my confused mind. All the while, I felt damned. To question religion was profane, heretical act that went against every moral tenet I had known at home. I identified very strongly with Stephen Dedalus in James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, because he went through a similar experience. He felt guilt when he first questioned Catholicism, believing that he would be consumed by the fires of hell for his doubt. In a way, that was what happened to me. The struggle with religious faith is a difficult experience to describe because it involves many things that are either repressed earlier in life or not understood. In the process, the fears that are not related to religious beliefs are released. By then, you no longer have any protection from your religion, and you have to start dealing with your dread. The real world closes in on you, cutting off traditional comforts like a simple prayer. Eventually, you and you alone have to deal with troubling questions. This always leads to anxiety. There is nothing, so you are free and terrified. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Incredible. So, in a way, the turmoil and conflict I was experiencing were a kind of madness with no way out. The patterns that appealed to me as answers to my questions were closed to me. Sunnyman represented an attractive way of life, but it did not provide the answers I was seeking. Melvin was into another appealing pattern, but I had never been able to handle school effectively. I was confused. Sunnyman had an illusion of freedom. Melvin had an approach, but I could not read. Nobody had the answers for me. Sometimes I went one way, sometimes another. Very interesting. You know, Huey P. Newton's growing up poor, black, in, you know, Jim Crow America, in the Bay Area in California. One brother is a drug dealer. The other one is going to university to be a philosopher. One is questioning, what does freedom actually mean? What does it mean to be alive? Do we have choice? Or is everything predetermined? And one other brother is driving around in a nice Cadillac, fucking on all the hoes. And he's like, what does it mean for me? Where do I stand in this world? Very interesting. That sounds like a movie, man, low key. That sounds like a movie. I can see that being a movie. Somebody print up that screenplay. You know what I mean? Even if you got to AI it, you know, make that a film. Young Huey P. in the Bay Area with Sunny Man and Melvin tugging on both shoulders. Interesting. I'm going to continue here. So I never expressed these feelings to my parents. I had such respect and admiration for my father, who had done so much for us, that I could not openly question his life. He would not have understood what I was going through. I was grateful. I was appreciative, and I loved and admired him. But I had questions not easily answered. When my high school years came to an end, these doubts and troubles were at a high pitch. They were still with me when I started Oakland City College in the fall of 1959, and were reflected in the new way of life I was beginning. My lifestyle alarmed my parents. They must have sensed my inner turmoil because they began to object strenuously to certain things I was doing. It was the beatnik era in the Bay Area, and I grew a beard. To my parents, a beard meant a bohemian, and my father insisted that I shave it off. I refused. Because he was accustomed to wielding total authority in our family, my refusal was a serious family violation. My father pressed me again to shave. I continued to resist. The climax came abruptly one night when he confronted me with an ultimatum to shave right then and there. I told him I would not do it. He struck me and I ran to him, grabbing him with a bear hug to restrain his arms and pushing him away. He chased me out of the house, but I could run much faster. I also knew that I was strong enough to overpower him, but I would never have done that. I just fled. My love for my father had clashed with the need for independence, symbolized by the beard. Knowing I could not return without shaving, I decided to move out. While my father was at work the next day, I packed my things and moved in with a friend, Richard Thorne. For years, a room was kept for me in my father's house, and periodically I returned home for a short period of time. Our differences mellowed and eventually disappeared. My room in my parents' house was not considered given up until 1968 when I was sentenced to prison. That's hilarious. That's kind of funny. Man, when I think about my own life, I can't grow a beard for one, but I did have dreadlocks back in the day. I did want to do cool stuff with my hair back when I had it, like, you know, rose, you know what I'm saying? Like all types of shit. I wanted to do different types of shit. And it wasn't my dad who was against it. It was my mom, you know what I mean? She's like old school, conservative, Caribbean woman. So no dreadlocks, boy, no cornrows, boy, shit like that. You know what I mean? So c'est la vie. But yeah, man, I kind of hope that I don't have a son, because I feel like two men in the house, especially high testosterone men like I know my son will be, that's going to cause me a headache. But then on the other hand, I kind of want a son so I can do better than, you know, my dad did. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to raise my son in a more loving, caring, understanding, less closed-minded, conservative home than the one I grew up in. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Who knows what happens? Who knows what will happen in the future? Who knows? I could die tomorrow. Anyway, that was the end of chapter 8. We're going to be reading our last chapter today of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. One more thing I want to check. Where how many chapters? Part 2. Okay. So we just finished moving on. Now we're going to College and the Afro-American Association 9. And let's start here. Black is not only beautiful, it's bad too. It's fast, classy, name-taking, and ass-kicking too, said Melvin Van Peebles in Ain't Supposed to Die, A Natural Death. Okay. Melvin Van Peebles, I believe he made that film, Badasses, Sweetback's Badass Song or something like that. I've been looking for that movie. If you know where we can watch Sweetback's Badass Song for Acting and Simon movie reviews, let me know so we can check it out. But let's go here. College and the Afro-American Association. Okay, hold on. One more time. Let me just make sure everything is working here. All right, anyway. In 1959, when I started at Oakland City College, now Merritt College, it was a junior college located in North Oakland, surrounded by the black community. Many local black people attended it at that time, and I joined the crowd. College for me was more than books and lectures and classes, although they were important. For one thing, I never really left my neighborhood, and I still ran with the brothers on the block. Any money I had came from petty crime, an old pattern with me. This, however, became a time for making new friends and joining organizations that started me in new directions. One of my first friends at Oakland City College was Richard Thorne. Richard was a very tall, very black fellow who even then, prior to the Black Cultural Revolution, wore his hair in a natural. His appearance caused awe in some people and frightened others. He knew how to excite these feelings and how to exert an influence over those around him. I stayed with Richard for about a month after I left home, before I moved into Poor Boys Hall. Poor Boys Hall was behind a bookstore across from the college. The owners had converted a big storage warehouse into a dormitory with rooms. Not really rooms, but stalls with thin plywood dividers. A stall rented for $15. I think back then that might have been like $150 a month. I loved being around Poor Boys Hall because most of my friends among the roomers were young fellows just beginning to get their thing together. Like me, they were searching. Some of them have gone on to become part of the system, while others have been further victimized. I kept up close contact with Richard Thorne too, and we spent a lot of time together at his apartment. Richard usually had several girls around and was always talking about the 2 or 3 books he intended to write. I was more interested in the girls. Shout out to Tom Leach up in the comment section. Shout out to everybody up in the comment section. Let's keep that conversation going in the comment section as we read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. By the way, shout out to Stole Poot, whatever Stole Poot. I hope I pronounced that right. Shout out to Stole Pool up in the chat as well as we continue to read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, his 1972 memoir. So, Richard had a theory about intimate human relations. He saw non-possessive love as pure love, the only love, and possessive love as a mockery of pure love. Non-possessive love did not enslave or constrain the love object. Richard was critical of bourgeois love relationships, of the marriage system, and the requirements of the marriage partners to each other. For example, sex with one partner, jealousy, limits upon mobility, well-defined roles based upon sex. He felt that people should not be like cars or houses. No man should own a wife, nor should a wife own a husband, because ownership is predicated upon control, fences, barriers, constraints, and psychological tyranny. Non-possessive love is based upon shared experiences and friendship. It is the kind of love we have for our bodies, for our thumb or foot. We love ourselves, our bodies, but we do not want to enslave any part of ourselves. I forgot, what year did he mention he's going to college? At the Oakland City College? 59. I wonder if in this text, is he going to mention Martin Luther King? Because MLK was like very active in these years, 1959, 61. It's sort of like he's in his own world, and like the civil rights movement isn't happening. Brown v. Board of Education, you know what I'm saying? Ruby Bridges and shit like that. Like all of that was happening like around this time. I wonder if he's going to mention seeing that on TV. Okay, but shout out to Tom Leach and Stole Poots up in the comment section. Once again, let's continue Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. So, Richard and I engaged in some deep discussions. Sometimes we stayed at his house for days, talking about the general situation, cursing the white man for everything, and drinking wine. When I tired of these sessions, I made it down to the block to be with the righteous street brothers. I was an angry young man at this time, drinking wine and fighting on the block, burglarizing homes in the Berkeley Hills, and going to school at Oakland City College. I was moving away from family and church, which had offered me so much comfort in earlier days, and was looking for something new. The questions I asked during this period were so disturbing that I acted outrageously to drive them away. I was looking for something more tangible with which to identify. I saw all the turmoil in terms of racism and exploitation and the obvious discrepancies between the haves and have-nots. I was trying to figure out how to avoid being crushed and losing respect for myself, how to keep from embracing the oppressor that had been that had already maimed my family and community. In the discussions at Phi Beta Sigma, a social fraternity I joined for a while, I expressed my anger about society and white racism. The others told me that I sounded like a guy named Donald Warden, who was preaching blackness at the Berkeley campus of the University of California. Back then, they were calling it preaching blackness. What? He was preaching that black shit. Boy, you sound like Talib Kweli. That's crazy. He was preaching blackness. What is preaching blackness? That's crazy. He was the head of an organization called the Afro-American Association, said Huey P. Newton. So I went to Berkeley to find Warden and hear what he was saying. The first member I met, though, was Maurice Dawson, one of Warden's tight partners. He turned me off with his arrogance. I had come searching for something, and he scorned me because I did not already know what I was seeking. I could not understand what he was saying about Afro-Americans. The term was new to me. Dawson really put me down. I mean, back then, were they saying like Negro? Were they saying Negro back then? Okay, you know what an Afro-Cuban is, asked Dawson to Huey P. Huey P. replies, yes. You know what an Afro-Brazilian is? He says, yes. Then why don't you know what an Afro-American is? It may have been apparent to him, but not for me. But I was still interested. Maurice taught me a lesson that I tried to apply to the Black Panther Party today. By the way, before I continue here, shout out to Big Boy Bud 9193. Shout out to Big Boy Bud up in the comment section. Let's keep this conversation going, okay? Shout out to Kenna Morrow, also in the comment section as well. Shout out to everybody who's joining. Let's continue Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton right here. So Huey says, Maurice taught me a lesson that I tried to apply to the Black Panther Party today. I dissuade party members from putting down people who do not understand. Even people who are unenlightened and seemingly bourgeois should be answered in a polite way. Things should be explained to them as fully as possible. I was turned off by a person who did not want to talk to me because I was not important enough. Maurice just wanted to preach to the converted, who already agreed with him. I try to be cordial because that way you win people over. You cannot win them over by drawing the line of demarcation, saying you are on this side and I am on the other. That shows a lack of consciousness. After the Black Panther Party was formed, I nearly fell into this error. I could not understand why people were blind to what I saw so clearly. Then I realized that their understanding had to be developed. I started going to meetings of the Afro-American Association, whose purpose was mainly to develop a sense of pride among Black people for their heritage, their history, and their contributions to culture and society. Donald Warden, a lawyer from the University of California at Berkeley, had started it. Most of the meetings were book discussion groups, which I enjoyed because by then I was relating to books more and more. I began reading books about Black people, and every Friday we sat up half the night discussing them. We read The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, and The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. So they were reading James Baldwin back then, but you got nothing to say about MLK? I think Huey is throwing shade. I think he's throwing shade because ain't no way you could be Black around this era and not, have your mind on the sparrow or your eyes on the sparrow. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I was one of the first 10 to join the organization. On Saturday afternoons, we would go into the Black community in Oakland or San Francisco and speak on the street corners, running down the racist system. People came to listen because they were bored and wanted some entertainment, not because Warden's words were relevant to their lives. I started to bring more of the poor, uneducated brothers off the block into the association. Most of the people in the association were college students and very bourgeoisie. But my people were off the block. Some of them could not even read, but they were angry and looking for a way to channel their feelings. Warden was glad to have sorry, I tripped up on this word. Warden was glad to have the Lumpen brothers along. We needed some strong-armed men who would just follow instructions without question. Some brothers and I formed a bodyguard for him. Sometimes our street meetings on Saturdays ended in fights because white boys came around looking for trouble. That was when I began to see through Warden. All right, so this sounds like the nascent beginnings of like the Black Panther Party, and it starts with the Afro-American Association that he joined when he was at Oakland City College, community college, you know what I'm saying? And you have brothers who were, uneducated, but passionate about making a change in society, some even illiterate, and they just wanted to get involved and be there. And then you had, the intellectual vanguard, the intelligentsia, who were reading the books, discussing the books, and forming a new identity, a new ideology, a new worldview. And it sounds like, the very beginnings of what would become the magic of the Black Panthers were forming around this time. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. My family thought that Warden was up to no good, and they were quite unhappy when I joined him. They said that he was interested only in building up his law practice, but I had to find out for myself. My disillusionment began when I realized he would not stand his ground in a fight. Once in a San Francisco meeting, some white guys yelled at us from a window and then came down to fight. I was throwing hands, trying to protect Warden. And when I looked up, he had run off, leaving us there by ourselves. Okay, that's pussy. That's pussy. That's big pussy. Huey throwing hands with the white boys. And the man that brought you in the organization is off running away. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. So, shout out to JRK Soldier X1436 for joining the conversation as well. Let's get that conversation going in the comments, guys. Just keep it rolling. We're back out here reading Revolutionary Suicide. This is episode 4 of Book React 18. Let's continue right here. So Huey P says, my real decision to quit the Afro-American Association came after I observed Warden in a debating situation where his training and skill should have put him in a superior position. The Oakland Tribune ran an article reporting how the city council had made derogatory remarks about the association. Warden wrote and asked to be placed on the agenda of their next meeting. About 20 of us went down to City Hall expecting Warden to take them to task. We were 8th on the agenda, and when our turn came, Mayor John Houlihan, who later went to jail for embezzlement, said that we could not speak then because some important people were there from Piedmont, an all-white upper-class area within the city limits of Oakland. Houlihan told us to wait until last, even though it was our turn on the agenda. I thought Warden would object, but no, he just bowed his head, and I thought I saw him shuffle a little. Oh, calling him a Tom. He said the leader of the Afro-American Association put his head between his legs and said, "Oh yes, sir," and shuffled off a little bit. Huey shady. Huey shady as hell. All right. Shout out to Desiree Johnson. Shout out to Desiree Johnson up in the chat. She says she likes my jacket. I appreciate that. Everybody likes my jacket, Everybody likes it. I go outside here in Budapest, Hungary, and everybody says that they like my jacket. So, but hopefully you like Huey P. Newton's book, Revolutionary Suicide, because we are on chapter 9 right now of this fabulous memoir that needs to be studied more. Continuing here, Huey P. Newton says, after the Piedmont merchants made their presentation, Houlihan declared the agenda closed because there was time to consider only 10 items. He told us to write the city council and say our piece. One of the councilmen insisted we be heard. However, since we had written to them in accordance with the rules and had been properly placed on the agenda, Don still had not taken a position. When he rose to speak, he started by saying we were there because the Tribune had reported some derogatory remarks made about us at the council's last meeting. He denied that the Afro-American Association wanted trouble. The association, he said, wanted an end to the lethargy of black people, to get them off welfare, make them clean themselves up, and sweep their streets in a big self-help effort. He said he wanted black people to stop lying around collecting unemployment checks. Oh, he just went up there and straight tommed. Oh, hell no. He went up there We were thinking he was going to be Malcolm X, and he turned into Candace Owens. Oh, hell no. Oh, no. Oh, no, baby, no. Anyway, so that was when I decided that my parents were right about him. Afterward, the whole city council, including Mayor Houlihan, patted Warden on the back. He ate it up. Okay. That's crazy. That's crazy. He ate it up. He said, oh, thank you. Thank you, boss. Oh, thank you, boss. I was just trying out here. Anyway, Dennis Simpson Legacy. Shout out to Dennis Simpson Legacy up in the comment section. And shout out to everybody up in the comment section right now. Hopefully you're enjoying our reading of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. So, continuing in the text, he says, I was really sick when I saw what went down before the city council. Warden talked about black folks as if we were a lazy bunch of people who hated ourselves and had no will to better our own situation. He said nothing about causes, although in that city council room, he was speaking to some of the major causes of black people suffering in the city of Oakland. Disillusioned, I left the organization, but not before I had gotten a lot out of it. Shout out to Dennis Simpson Legacy, continuing to show love in the chat. I appreciate that. And everybody else, continue to show love, have a conversation, speak amongst yourselves, but also listen to the words of Huey P. Newton as we read his story. Continuing. Disillusioned, I left the organization, but not before I had gotten a lot out of it. For one thing, I had begun to learn about the black past, but I could not accept Warden's refusal to deal with the black present. He was obviously interested in building his law practice and routinely began street meetings by saying that he did not have to be there, that he was Phi Beta Kappa and a lawyer. A lot of people who went to him for legal services found him out. They thought he would charge less money, being one of them, but he charged high fees. He charged some damn high fees. I went to him once, and he charged more than double the usual fee. Another attorney asked for $250, but Warden wanted $750 before he even stepped in the courtroom. Oh, hell, that's crazy. That's crazy. Whew. Shout out to Desiree Johnson up in the chat. Yeah, I feel like I remember reading something else Huey P. wrote way back in the gap. And I kind of remember this sort of like writing style of being like shady and petty and like calling out people by name for being like, you know, two-timing. And I feel like this is like maybe a personality trait of his coming out in the text. I'm going to continue here. So he offered the community solutions that solved nothing. I could have accepted this if he had been ignorant, but I believed he knew what he was doing. At least he knew what the popular position was. That is why I tell the Black Panther Party that we must never take a stand just because it is popular. We must analyze the situation objectively and take the logically correct position, even though it may be unpopular. If we are right in the dialectics of the situation, our position will prevail. Warden was just the opposite. He rode the tide, even if it went against the community. He talked of a mass exodus to Africa and never believed in it. He maintained that capitalism in general, and black capitalism in particular, was the best economic system. The only thing wrong with it, he said, was the racism in the system. He never spoke of the link between capitalist exploitation and racism. Wanting whites to believe that blacks were behind him, Warden talked up black power and black history, using the people to gain their support. Downtown, he looked for whites to support him out of their fear of organized blacks. Warden gathered the people around him to lead them like sheep. This is what he did at the city council. Okay? I have to say this, man. Racism is a problem, but the bigger problem, I would say, is white racial capitalism. Or racial capitalism, however you want to frame it. But there can be no analysis of the issues of misogyny, sexism, nationalism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia without an analysis and critique of capitalism, because capitalism is the root where all of these ills spring from. So I applaud Huey for pointing out here, as I knew he would, because you know, Huey P. Newton was the leader of the Black Panther Party, which was a Marxist-Leninist organization. But there are many people that talk about Huey's name or bring up Huey's legacy or cloth themselves in the robes of the Black Panthers and have nothing to say about capitalism. There are actually people, ironically enough, who will put on the black beret, put on the black leather jacket, hold a shotgun in their hand, and then at the same time say, brother, we need to invest in the stock market. We need to open up an LLC. Like, what the hell? Where they do that at? Wait, what part of the Black Panther platform is it to become the petty bourgeoisie? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So the guy Dawson, he's talking about, the fake lawyer, fake radical guy, Uncle Tom, as he was saying. He is the only black man I know with 2 weekly radio programs and 1 on television. The mass media, the oppressors, give him public exposure for only one reason. He will lead the people away from the truth of their situation. Others also drifted away from the Afro-American Association. Richard Thorne was in it for a while, but he left to found the Sexual Freedom League. Later, he organized a spiritual cult called Eternal and changed his name to He is now that cult's unquestioned high priest, or God. Another member of the Afro-American Association at that time was a skinny, bright, and articulate fellow called Ron Everett. He went from the association to Watts in Los Angeles, where he established his own cultural nationalist group, US. Interesting. I did not know. See, you learn something new every day. Ron Everett, the founder of US, which was like a cultural, like, those are the brothers in dashikis and, big afros and, trying to learn Swahili, you know what I'm saying? The founder of US, Ron Everett, and Huey P. Newton were both a part of the Bay Area Afro-American Association Club. I didn't know that. Look at that. And US eventually became a cult, as Huey P. Newton says right here. He says US was founded by Ron Everett and eventually became a cult. He called himself Karenga, the original. Later, the Black Panthers had some bitter confrontations with US, and they killed 2 of our finest comrades. And that's the end of chapter 9. Very powerful chapters, very interesting chapters right here. Once again, the writing style of Huey P. Newton in his book is very lucid, very very smooth, straightforward. It's not very bombastic. This is actually I was expecting Huey P.'s book to be a lot harder to read than Angela Davis's book, which I read last year. The autobiography of Angela Davis, I think that's the title. It's on my bookshelf back here. I forgot the title. Or Asada's book, right? But this is actually one of the easier books to read, and I'm very happy that we're starting to read it together. So we're going to wrap it up here. Like I said, we're just going to read 3 chapters a day. Though tomorrow we might read all of 4. We might read 4 chapters because, I want to end all of the parts of this book in 2 episodes each. So part 2, we read the first 3 chapters, but there's 4 more left to go. And we'll do that next time. And then start with part 3 the day after that. So hopefully you enjoyed reading Revolutionary Suicide. Shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. I'm going to give a shout out to everybody real quick who left a comment. Recognize and realize, if you want to also read the text that I'm reading along with me, you can do that by going to the other live stream I'm running simultaneously on this channel, where we have the text on the screen. But let me give a shout out to Dennis Simpson Legacy. Let me give a shout out to Desiree Johnson 6286. Let me give a shout out to JRK Soldier, Big Boy Bud, Kenamaru, Tom Leach, Stole Poot, HUD1, Mar Gomez, Eyes Opened, Big Wet Burrito, Godspeed, King 2241, Andre Beja, Avery Adams, Kirsten Daniels, and that's it. Shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. I will catch y'all tomorrow. Y'all be easy out there. Oh, by the way, shout out to M Wells 25. All right. Yeah. Shout out to M Wells 25. Shout out to Dennis Simpson Legacy. All right. So yeah, shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. I appreciate all of y'all for coming in. Catch you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to continue with episode 5 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. Peace.